All right, we're being joined by Joachim Mark Ebong on this particular topic, looking at the sugar industry. Thank you very much, Joachim, for joining us on the show.
Good to have you.
Thank you for having
despite a growing health consciousness, sugar production in Nigeria has been identified as a revenue opportunity, for the country as the world pay attention to the climate change, with ethanol witnessing growing demand in the transportation system. However, sugar output in Nigeria has remained low. Just wondering why.
Yes, it has remained low. Like you rightly said, sugar is one of Nigeria's most important commodities. And because of that, the government back in 2010 or so saw that we were spending a lot of foreign exchange on importing sugar, and decided to come up with a national sugar master plan in order to help to increase the volume, of sugar produced in the country. But that hasn't happened. And one of the reasons for that, at least, according to some players in the industry, is that not everybody is playing by the rules. So what the government was trying to do with the sugar master plan was to give a concessionary rate for the importation of raw sugar, while those people giving that concessionary rate now get local capacity and use backward integration in the country.
Like
here.
What the central bank governor is saying.
Yes, precisely. Yeah. So basically what he's trying to do in your last clip is that they're just trying to double down on the National Sugar Master Plan. And then as production comes up, which they hope it will, then they will now put sugar on the list of commodities that are not eligible for foreign exchange. So unfortunately, that plan hasn't really taken off because some of those targets and some of those quotas are not being really adhered to by all the players in the industry. So the idea is that the government says you get a lower rate to import sugar, raw sugar, while you are trying to ramp up production. But that is focused on certain benchmarks. Now, those benchmarks, unfortunately, are self-reported, so there is now the need for the government to begin to verify many of those claims in order to know who is abiding by the standards, so that the incentives are properly aligned, and then we can begin to see the increase in production.
So perhaps is these discrepancies that we saw what happened this past week over the social media, where there's a lot of argument about what's happening in that sector.
Yes, and there is a lot of back and forth among these players. On one hand, it has been alleged that one of them is using the export processing zone, the lower rates that apply in the zone there to put in, but instead of using the sugar produced there for exports, is putting the sugar back into the local market, and creating distorting the market, as it were. Well, there's another allegation saying that there's some sort of duopoly and price fixing and artificial scarcity being created. And so it's important now for the government, for the Ministry of Trade and Investment, to really step in and look at how the companies are abiding by the plan, because those quotas for imports are given based on their level of commitment to backward integration and the capacity that they have on ground and the capacity that they are building. But those need to be verified by ministry officials on the ground, and not just having them, speak for themselves, as it were, or maybe respond directly to allegations. That's not the role of regulation. The role of regulation is to ensure that the rules that were agreed on are applied across board, and everybody is, abiding by those rules. And where some issues may come up, in order to optimize the plan on the ground, then they should all do that around the table and not, subject these things to the court of public opinion.
So another factor hindering sugar production is land acquisition. And many sugarcane farms have been turned to residential use. For you, what's your take on solving this issue, when it comes to land, getting the hectares needed for sugar production?
So typically, the all land is vested in the federal government, specifically in the state governments. And so, depending on the various issues between the communities on one hand, the government, and the producers, I mean the would-be producers on the other hand, they will need to come up with a way by which, they can get the land that they need, and then everybody can be happy. But the problem is that, again, like you said, the need for the states to actually allocate land and then combine with the interests of communities that have already been on the ground there and have been living there for quite a while. So they need to balance all these various interests. Again, that is where the issue of governance and regulation comes in. If the Ministry of Trade and Investment wants there to be an increase in sugar production, these are some of the issues that they need to sit down around a table with the communities, the state governments, and the companies to solve, in order for everybody to get, some kind of a win-win scenario. As we all know, sugarcane production is pretty land-intensive, and again, if you don't get the land, you won't be able to ramp up production to the level that Nigeria needs in order to achieve, one, self-sufficiency, and even enough also to export.
All right, let's look at some of the incentives now that the government have tried to put in place to boost domestic production of sugar. Have a 5-year tax for investors in the value chain, a 10% import duty and 50% levy on imported raw sugar, and then a 20% duty and 60% levy for imported refined sugar. How effective are these incentives?
So typically, they should be pretty effective in order to increase investment. But again, when you are able to use something like an export processing zone and use the generated produced sugar not for export like it's supposed to be, because Nigeria is in dire need of foreign exchange, and part of the reason, and there are two ways to do that. You can conserve the one you already have, and you can also export goods and then get foreign exchange. So that is the plus there, and then on the minus side. But when you're not able to export like you're supposed to, like the regulation says, and there is not enough verification of that on the ground, so you have that issue where those incentives now begin to break down. Because if 2 people or 3 people are abiding by laid down regulations, and then now 1 or 2 or 3 people who are not, it distorts the incentives. And all of these are signals that current investors and would-be investors are also looking at before they can put their money into invest, and not just even in sugar, but even in all the other sectors. Now, Nigeria is not a country that has lack of plans. Nigerians can plan for the ages, right? But the problem, as always, is the capacity to enforce those plans. The capacity to let people say that, hey, we're not going to allow one rule for you and one rule for somebody else. And if there is, and if there are issues in the industry that warrant people needing to come around the table to discuss and find a way around it, then that's fine, but not just allowing people to skirt around those rules. And that is what has really plagued Nigeria's lack of an industrial base so far, because creating industry is difficult, it's hard, and you need firm rules and firm application of those rules in order to see the industry that you want to create. And those industries are what will give Nigerians the high-quality jobs that will, reduce poverty and all of those things that we all talk about so much.
Okay, how are we doing compared to other African countries?
Again, not very well. I mean, Nigeria sugar production has been largely flat now for about 10 years or maybe more. And so it's not really very well done with regard to even across agric products. Our yields and so on are well below the average for Africa. So we need to work a lot on those things. The yields, the mechanization, the use of irrigation and so on. So all of those things are the things that are really holding Nigerian agriculture back. This kind of large-scale investment that the NSMP was supposed to engender would have accelerated issues, things like mechanization, use of irrigation, and so on. And then the knowledge gained there may even be applied to other sectors and to other food groups as well, in order to boost capacity across agriculture in Nigeria. But again, that really hasn't happened. And before the CBN takes any action with regard to putting sugar on the exports on the forex restriction list, these issues really need to be solved, and we need to see a real ramp up in sugar production before we can say that yes, we have dealt with this sector, we've conquered this sector, and then we can go on now to other sectors and then apply
now that we're talking
lessons.
about climate change. Anyway, Brazil is the leading global producer of sugar. Are there lessons to be learned from Brazil, perhaps to better understand how to enter the ethanol market? So
the ethanol market, like you said, has been dominated by Brazil. But the thing is, Brazil's agricultural practices are quite a way ahead of Nigeria as well, and are also just the industrial know-how, the ability, the industrial base is significantly ahead of that. And what the NSMP was supposed to do was to try to bring some of Nigeria's biggest industrialists, into this conversation and tell them that, look, you have your Dangote, you have your Bua, you have your flour mills and so on. And to say that you guys are some of the biggest industrialists in the country, bring your expertise, bring your know-how, bring your money into this sector. Let us see how we can conquer it. And the fact that we haven't done so is something that really the Ministry of Trade and Investment needs to look into. The Ministry of Finance, the CBN, need to really come and sit down and find out why this hasn't happened yet, because these are some of the biggest players in the game. And if for any reason or reasons they cannot make it work, then it is definitely something that we need to look into much more closely.
How we can solve such problems.
And I guess the earlier we do that, the better for
definitely
everyone, and of course encourage more investment into the sector. Thank you very much, Joachim Mac-Airborne, Senior Analyst at SBM Intelligence. We do appreciate your time.